Breaking today, popularity ratings for Meghan Markle in her home country of America are absolutely damning.
It does seem to be that it is coming towards the end of their grifts, and they have not got many options left.
So this really is a crisis now. But actually, this is really fascinating because it's like massive dip in US popularity, massive dip in US website traffic, all at the same time.
Something is shifting in Meghan Markle's American image, and this time, the receipts are real. It's not gossip, not opinion, not social media drama. It's cold, hard data. New polling and digital traffic numbers coming out of the US are telling a story that looks nothing like the polished public narrative being pushed around the Duchess of Sussex. While her post-royal brand has been sold to us as influential, aspirational, and commercially unstoppable, the latest figures are revealing something far less glamorous: a steady, undeniable decline in public interest and approval. And it doesn't stop there. At the very same time Meghan's popularity is slipping, her lifestyle brand, as ever, is showing a matching drop in engagement. Web traffic data shows fewer American visitors month after month, and this is happening in the only active consumer market she has left.
A drop like that is huge and quick. Like usually you'll tend to see like maybe up a couple of points, down a couple of points, depending on people say have had a big movie out or if they've been involved in a big story. But a 13-point decline over 2 quarters. Trust me, this is what like a PR expert would say required a reputational crisis management intervention. The problem is, I think that's been tried so often by Meghan.
That's two separate signals: public sentiment and commercial attention, both moving in the same direction at the same time. That kind of overlap is impossible to ignore. But the numbers are just the beginning, because a second controversy is now building right alongside them, and it hits differently. People are starting to ask serious questions about the role major media outlets are playing in shaping Meghan's public image. Are they reporting on her? Or are they running cover for her? And at the center of that conversation is one name nobody expected: People magazine. For years, People has been one of Meghan's most reliable sources of glowing press. But in 2026, critics say the volume and tone of that coverage has crossed into a whole new territory. These aren't stories about major achievements, political impact, or industry-shifting moves. Instead, the pattern is always the same: lifestyle features, fashion breakdowns, curated personal moments, and soft glimpses into Meghan's everyday world: her wardrobe, her home aesthetic, her kitchen style.
Harry and Meghan operate on PR. They need to get stories out there to tell the world that they're doing great, even though everything is quite clearly and obviously crumbling down around them. And I can't help but feel it's like when people buy a bumper pack of advertising. You want the billboard package that includes a magazine and a certain number of articles. You pay X amount of money: the VIP, the gold package, the bronze package.
Her brand, even minor appearances or a single product mention, gets stretched into a full-scale feature. According to those who've been tracking the coverage closely, People magazine has published over 100 Meghan-related pieces in 2026 alone. And the repetition isn't just in the topics, it's in the messaging: devoted mother, loving wife, successful entrepreneur, misunderstood but resilient public figure. Different headlines, same structure, different angles, identical tone, over and over and over again. That pattern has sparked a pointed question online. At what point does relentless positive coverage stop being journalism and start functioning as straight-up image management? One of the most talked about examples is a recent feature on Meghan's coastal kitchen: aesthetic decorative items, design choices, lifestyle vibes. Critics say this isn't reporting, it's brand construction dressed up as editorial content. Supporters call it harmless celebrity lifestyle journalism. But critics see something more calculated: a tightly controlled narrative loop where flattering framing gets recycled on repeat, with zero scrutiny, zero contrast, and zero challenge. The conversation got even sharper when commentary surfaced, suggesting that Meghan's broader media strategy is built on selective visibility, frequent lifestyle exposure, paired with carefully managed silence on anything remotely.
The most recent headline says Meghan Markle's coastal kitchen has us eyeing rustic cake stands, floral plates, and more charming finds from $9. Now, can we just be honest about it? Because everyone knows their kitchen is gross. But there's a reason why Meghan never uses their own kitchen for her TV show or her photo shoots. Because it's dark, it's dingy, it's dated, and apparently it's the laughingstock of the Montecito locals. So for People magazine to say that actually people are wanting these floating wooden shelves, copper cookware, and bamboo spoons was a new low.
Controversial. In that light, People magazine isn't just being talked about as a publication anymore. It's being talked about as an active player in the story itself. Something else is now impossible to ignore, and it's backed by numbers. Critics have been getting louder, but now the data is catching up, and it's showing that public interest in Meghan Markle may be moving in the exact opposite direction of her media presence. For years, her image in the US has been described as politically irrelevant, but culturally unavoidable. A figure who keeps generating attention, controversy, and media cycles, even without dropping anything major. That constant visibility got read as stability. Love her or hate her, she stayed in the conversation. But recent polling data suggests that grip on public attention may be loosening in a very measurable way. According to YouGov's rolling sentiment tracking in the United States, Meghan's approval ratings shifted significantly between late 2025 and early 2026, one of the sharpest short-term drops in her public perception since stepping away from royal duties.
Anyone there that actually does any reporting and not really focus on the terrible things that have gone on with African parks and Harry still promoting them. How can they not talk about the fact that Harry is being sued by Centre Barley, but instead Harry and Meghan's life is great. Harry and Meghan's life is amazing. They know that kitchen that Meghan is posing in is not her kitchen. They know it was a hired house, yet there's still that article saying, oh, look at Meghan, everybody's so jealous of her coastal kitchen. That's not her kitchen. You know it's not her kitchen, but you're still pumping that out there.
Back in the third quarter of 2025, she registered 37% favorable and 22% unfavorable, a net approval of +15. Not massive, but solid enough to show she had more supporters than critics and a wide enough gap to suggest her image was holding steady. By the first quarter of 2026, that picture had completely changed. The same tracking system clocked her at 29% favorable and 27% unfavorable, a net approval of just +2. That's a 1-3-point drop in net approval in just 2 quarters, and that kind of movement doesn't happen by accident. Two things make this shift stand out. First, the gap between positive and negative sentiment has nearly collapsed. The public is now almost evenly split. Second, the speed of the decline points to something more than slow background drift. This looks like a concentrated period of serious reevaluation happening across multiple months. And because YouGov uses a rolling system collecting responses continuously rather than in a single snapshot, these numbers aren't tied to one viral moment or one bad headline. They reflect aggregated public sentiment over an extended stretch of time. That makes the trend harder to explain away. What's even more telling is that both metrics moved at once. Favorable ratings went down while unfavorable ratings went up simultaneously, a combination that typically signals polarization tipping into negative territory, not just quiet disengagement.
This manufactured nonsense, like you said, it is just pure Sussex propaganda, and they are ignoring the truth that everybody can see.
And Harry can't afford to keep pumping in the millions and millions because they're going through the inheritance money.
Her popularity has been in freefall because everybody knew that it would happen. There were so many people that predicted it, and they're right.
All of this was happening while Meghan remained highly visible lifestyle features, brand updates, media coverage, public commentary. The exposure was there, but the goodwill? Apparently not keeping pace, and sentiment is only one piece of the story. Because running alongside the polling decline is a second data set that's raising just as many eyebrows, digital traffic numbers connected to her lifestyle brand as ever, showing a strikingly similar drop in US audience engagement. Two separate indicators, same direction, same time frame. That kind of alignment doesn't just raise questions, it demands them. The numbers connected to Meghan's lifestyle brand, as ever, are telling a story that's hard to spin away, and the trajectory is going in one direction only. Web traffic analytics tracking the platform's US performance over a 5-month period show a clear, consistent decline in the one market that actually matters commercially, because the US is the only confirmed operating market for as ever. American visitors aren't just a metric, they're the whole ballgame.
Meghan Markle's popularity among Americans fell in the first 3 months of 2026, at the same time as visits to her as ever online shop also dipped. These figures represent a sharp drop from the third quarter of 2025.
In December, As Ever pulled in roughly 246,000 total visits, with around 108,000 coming from the United States. That was the baseline, the starting point. American users made up the core of the brand's commercially relevant audience, the people most likely to actually buy something. January saw overall traffic tick up slightly to 268,000, but US traffic dropped to 89,000. That divergence was the first red flag. More total visitors, but fewer Americans. The audience growing in places that can't spend money on the brand. February kept the slide going. Total visits fell to 213,000, and US traffic dropped further to around 83,500. Both numbers moving down at the same time, not a fluke, not a correction, a pattern. March brought a small bounce, 226,000 total visits. US traffic back up to 94,000. But that recovery didn't even come close to restoring December's numbers, and it didn't last. April hit hardest.
Meghan recorded around 246,000 visitors to the site, of which 108,000 were from the US. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? Because she's only selling to the US. So it means she's getting well over 100,000 visits that actually are irrelevant to her business proposition. It might be people like me who are looking a bit nosily and saying, oh, ha, 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 isn't that funny, this latest message or whatever. But they're not buying product. But, and this is a huge but, US visits fell to 89,000, indicating that the US traffic declined despite an overall increase in visits. And Meghan, I repeat, is only selling to America, which means that her sort of customer base has actually dipped to 89,000. Remember, the vast majority of those people will not be buying anything.
Total visits collapsed to 178,000, and US traffic fell to just 61,500, nearly half of where it started in December. That's not a dip, that's a serious drop. Across the full 5 months, the picture is consistent, a starting point above 100,000 US visitors, followed by a progressive slide that minor fluctuations couldn't reverse, ending at a level dramatically below where the brand launched. And since international visitors don't translate into actual sales under As Ever's current structure, those global numbers are essentially decorative. The US figure is the only one that genuinely measures viability, and that's the one in freefall. Taken month by month, you could try to write each dip off as normal early-stage variation. But plotted across the full period, the direction becomes undeniable. From 108,000 down to 61,500, that gap is no longer something you can brush aside, and it's now front and center in conversations about audience retention and the long-term staying power of Meghan's commercial ventures.
And of course, what she probably should do is shutter As Never. It should just go as ever. Sorry, was never, as Lady C calls it. It should just go. It should just be shuttered. It should just be consigned to the to the trash heap. She should give away, Tash, the millions of cans of jam. What do you call tins of jams? She should give them away to worthy causes. Seriously, she should send them to Africa. She should just, she should take the financial hit.
Africa has been through enough, Dan. They've been through enough. Meghan oversaturated us. She was everywhere. It was every week. It was magazine interviews. It was As Ever. It was Netflix. It was specials. It was appearances and pap strolls. Then, of course, we had, the disaster tourism. It has been relentless. And then for them to also, which I think has definitely damaged them, for them to suddenly flip back round and trying to be taken seriously as royals again has backfired on epic proportions, because they have then lost another chunk of their remaining fan base.
What makes it even more striking is that this traffic decline runs parallel to the polling drop happening over the same time frame. Two separate data sets, two separate indicators, both pointing the same direction at the same time. Nobody's calling it cause and effect, but that kind of parallel movement, it's not something analysts or critics are willing to just scroll past. As Ever's operational setup is already working against it, and the clock is ticking, the brand is almost entirely dependent on the US market, with no fully established international rollout in place. That's a dangerously narrow foundation, where one audience segment is carrying the entire commercial weight, and that one segment, it's the one showing the sharpest decline. That context makes the recent US traffic drop far more serious than it would be for a globally diversified brand. There's no European market to cushion the fall, no Asian audience picking up the slack. When American engagement slides, the whole brand feels it immediately.
And the outside traffic, yeah, it's people like myself. It's people on social media going to have a look at what videos she's dropped, to see what silliness she's done now. Is she stroking herself? Is she eyeing up, a fictional man in the background as she slaps some sauce into a jar? I mean, she's become rather comical.
April was disastrous. It tanked 178,000 overall, but just 61,500 in the US. Now, remember, if you look at the start of the year, she was at 108,000. That's almost a halving of her internet traffic in the US, which is where she is selling to.
On top of that, there's talk of expanding into fashion and beauty. Sounds exciting on paper, but the timing raises serious questions. Scaling a brand while its core engagement metrics are trending downward is a risky move in any industry. In commercial terms, it's a direct mismatch between growth ambition and audience momentum, and that gap is hard to paper over with good press. The situation is already drawing comparisons to other celebrity-led ventures that needed years of heavy financial backing before finding solid ground. Victoria Beckham's fashion business is the name that keeps coming up, a brand that went through sustained restructuring and long periods of losses before reaching a more stable position. The question being asked now is whether As Ever has access to that same level of structural support, and so far, that question doesn't have a clear public answer. There's also a deeper issue specific to celebrity-driven brands, one that makes them uniquely vulnerable. Unlike traditional retail businesses, these ventures are tightly tied to personal public perception. When sentiment shifts, consumer behavior follows. That creates a feedback loop that's difficult to break out of. Public interest shapes traffic, traffic shapes perceived success, and perceived success feeds back into public interest.
And again, like we said earlier, even the promoting and rewarding the trolls. Meghan and Harry have really been the masters of their own demise, and seeing these figures in real time, it is incredibly damaging, because it's showing that everything is gone. They've pretty much hanging on tooth and nail to everything now, and I'd be very surprised if As Ever's got another 18 months in it, in all honesty. I can't see anyone's going to even want to try and buy it off of her, which I think is what she's desperately trying to do. She's trying to make it look like, look, I've sold over 1 million jars of jam. Look at all of the traffic. Look at all of these people. I think she's probably out there trying to scope around for some poor schmuck to try and buy it off of her. Like she sees these deals with other people, like Justin Bieber's wife. She sold her makeup collection for millions, if not, closer to 1 billion. But there's nothing As Ever. Who the hell would want to buy that shit?
Once that loop starts spinning in the wrong direction, every dip in engagement becomes part of the brand's story, not just a business metric. And then there's the identity question sitting right in the middle of any expansion plan. If As Ever moves into beauty or fashion, does it launch under the existing brand name or as something entirely separate? That decision carries real consequences either way. Launching under the same umbrella means inheriting all the existing perception trends, good and bad. Launching separately means starting from scratch, in a market where attention is already fragmented and loyalty is hard to earn. Neither path is clean, and neither is without risk. For now, these remain open questions without confirmed answers.
And the issue that she's really got is that, so she has obviously decided, well, I need to go down the beauty path, I need to go down the fashion path, which she first rejected, right?
Yeah.
But Tash, what is going to be really difficult from a branding point of view, and this really matters, especially as you say, if you're trying to prepare a business to be sold, is like, does she launch that under As Ever, which is already a failed brand? Any branding expert would tell you no. But then the problem is she ends up competing with herself because she has one brand that's failing while trying to launch another brand.
But in a brand story already defined by declining traffic and shifting sentiment, open questions have a way of becoming very loud, very fast. The real question isn't about any single data point anymore, it's about direction. Are these trends a temporary dip, or the early signs of a deeper structural problem for the brand? That's the conversation that's now impossible to shut down. And it's not just the numbers driving that conversation. The media framing surrounding Meghan Markle has become its own controversy, and People magazine is right at the center of it. Throughout 2026, the publication has kept up a relentless stream of Meghan-related content, and the pattern is hard to miss. Fashion choices, home aesthetics, personal milestones, curated family moments, lifestyle coverage on repeat, with little to no investigative or critical balance in sight. The recurring themes are almost formulaic at this point: devoted mother, supportive partner, successful entrepreneur, resilient figure navigating post-royal life. The headlines change, but the structure underneath stays exactly the same. According to aggregated observations circulating in public commentary, People magazine has published well over 100 Meghan-focused pieces in 2026 alone. 100. And critics aren't just pointing at individual articles, they're pointing at the volume.
They don't bring in an income. They've got no career. They've got no big deals. They've got no big contracts. They've got nothing left to bring in the big bucks. None of the other streaming services after Netflix, made them free, seem to be interested in coming in and swooping them up in a contract. You've not heard anything from like Disney, Paramount, and Amazon. Nope. Amazon, there's no chance. I think now that she's really upset Sanchez. But yeah, I am struggling to see how they're going to continue to bring in the sort of money to have the lifestyle that they quite clearly want.
The uniformity and what that combination signals over time. Supporters of the approach say this is simply audience-driven entertainment journalism, consistent coverage of a high-interest public figure, nothing more. But critics are pushing back hard, arguing that when a single positive tone dominates output at that scale and frequency, the line between reporting and image reinforcement stops being clear. This debate isn't happening in isolation either. It's running parallel to the polling shifts and the traffic declines. And while media coverage doesn't directly cause those numbers to move, it absolutely shapes the environment in which public perception forms. That makes lifestyle publications like People more than passive observers. They become active participants in a broader ecosystem built on sentiment, commercial performance, and narrative repetition. And it goes even further than one magazine. Commentary has expanded to call out the wider media structure around celebrity coverage, where similar articles get syndicated, repackaged, and rephrased across multiple outlets, creating a cycle of reinforced visibility even when there's nothing genuinely new to report. The story keeps circulating.
And then she should start again. And she should start again with the Meghan Markle fashion and beauty brand. But again, I struggle to see how it's going to work.
And Harry and Meghan do not have that sort of money. They do not have that sort of likability. They have got no talent between them. They've got no job. What, Harry being the chimpo at Better Up, he's hardly going to be raking in the millions. He can't even fill, what was it, like 150 bottoms on seats over in Australia. Meghan couldn't even get, that venue.
The framing stays consistent. The narrative gets louder simply through repetition. So when you stack it all together, the media output, the sentiment shifts, the commercial data, what emerges isn't a picture built on one source or one bad headline. It's multiple streams of information, all moving in the same direction, at the same time. And that's a much harder thing to explain away. And this is where all the threads come together, and the picture they form is impossible to dismiss. 3 completely separate streams of information are now being tracked in parallel, and they're all telling a version of the same story. But before we get to what it all means, let's make sure the full weight of each layer actually lands, because when you look at them closely, the details are striking. Start with the sentiment data. YouGov's rolling tracking system, which collects responses continuously rather than in a single snapshot, recorded one of the sharpest short-term movements in Meghan Markle's US public perception in recent memory. Back in the third quarter of 2025, she was sitting at a net approval of +15, noticeably positive. More Americans viewed her favorably than unfavorably, and the margin between those two groups was wide enough to suggest her image was holding steady in her adopted home country.
Everything you had to endure growing up in the royal family, everything Meghan had to endure because of the horrible, wicked royal family. And then obviously Harry and Meghan are like, we want to be treated like royals again. We would like to be, allowed back in. We want the king to come to the Invictus Games. We want the royal family to be supporting us again. People have lost interest in them. They've lost respect in them. I mean, the crowds that she drew from, going over to Geneva to be taken seriously, talking about child online safety. And I mean, what, in the same 12-hour span, posts another picture of her daughter in pajamas, looking like she's shining her shoes, like Orphan Annie and Miss Hannigan. I mean, the woman is literally hitting self-destruct on everything.
That's not a small thing for someone who had stepped away from royal life and was building an entirely new public identity from scratch. But by the first quarter of 2026, that margin had shrunk to just +2. A 1-3-point drop in net approval across 2 quarters. And what makes that movement particularly significant isn't just the size of it, it's the structure. Both ends of the scale moved at the same time. Favorable ratings went down while unfavorable ratings went up simultaneously. That's not passive disengagement, where people simply stop paying attention. That's active re-evaluation, people who once held a positive view shifting toward a more critical one. In polling terms, that kind of dual movement typically signals something more deliberate happening in public perception, and it happened while Meghan remained highly visible across media platforms. The exposure was there, the goodwill was not keeping pace. Then there's the commercial layer.
Crunched the numbers and worked out that it's not only the was never business that is crashing, it links directly with the crash in Meghan's US popularity. Like in the past, People magazine may have been able to say, oh, well, actually, the Brits don't like Meghan, but we have an audience that does like Meghan. Well, not if you look at the new figures that Jack Royston has revealed in Newsweek.
As ever's US web traffic data over a 5-month window tells a story that mirrors the sentiment shift almost point for point. In December, the brand recorded approximately 108,000 US-based visits, its strongest performance in the tracked period, and the clearest signal of active domestic audience interest. By April, that number had fallen to just 61,500, nearly half. And this isn't a brand with a global cushion to absorb that kind of drop. As Ever operates with the United States as its only confirmed active consumer market, meaning every percentage point of lost US engagement hits the brand directly and without offset from other regions. The monthly breakdown makes the pattern even clearer. January saw total traffic tick upward while US traffic fell, an early signal that whatever curiosity was driving visits, it wasn't coming from the audience that could actually convert into customers. February saw both metrics drop simultaneously. March brought a partial recovery that still failed to restore December's baseline. And then April arrived with the steepest decline of the entire sequence. No single month looks like a dramatic collapse in isolation. But plotted across the full period, the direction becomes undeniable. This is not random variation. This is a trend. And sitting on top of both of these datasets is the media layer, arguably the most complex and contested piece of the entire conversation. People magazine's coverage of Meghan Markle in 2026 has been consistent, high volume, and almost uniformly positive in framing.
Newsweek, formerly an ally of the Sussexes, has revealed that not only are visits to the as ever, or was never, as Lady Colin Campbell calls it, website, down, 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 so too is her overall popularity in America, which means this whole mission has been a disaster. Why this means People magazine is now becoming the official propaganda outfit for Harry and Meghan to quite a ludicrous extent.
Over 100 pieces published in a single year, centered on lifestyle content, personal moments, fashion choices, home aesthetics, and curated brand identity. Devoted mother, loving wife, successful entrepreneur, resilient public figure. The themes rotate, but the underlying message stays locked in place. Critics aren't arguing that any single article is dishonest. The argument is about the cumulative effect of that volume and that consistency over time. When a single tone dominates output at that scale, without critical balance, investigative contrast, or meaningful challenge to the narrative, the line between journalism and image management becomes genuinely difficult to locate, and that ambiguity is now being discussed openly, not just in comment sections, but in broader media criticism circles that are paying close attention to how celebrity coverage functions as a system rather than as individual stories. What makes that media discussion particularly pointed is the timing. This sustained wave of positive lifestyle coverage is running parallel to declining sentiment and declining commercial engagement. The visibility machine is operating at full capacity. The audience response, by multiple measurements, is moving in the opposite direction.
And the fact that People magazine ignores the actual truth and the evidence that is out there to show that Harry and Meghan are not doing great across any areas, but they continue this manufactured pumping out of these articles. It's like they bought the gold package and they're going to continue to keep pumping it out.
Look at this. Meghan Markle hyped in the podiatrist-approved sneakers shoppers say feel comfortable. Now, she wore this once. She wore these sneakers once in Australia. Royally Sage pointed out Rachel is reduced to being an influencer. That is an embarrassing drop from being a working royal.
That gap between media output and measurable public response is the tension sitting at the center of everything being discussed right now. There's also a structural dimension to the brand story that deserves attention on its own terms. As Ever is not just facing declining traffic metrics, it's facing those metrics at a moment when expansion is reportedly being considered. Fashion, beauty, broader lifestyle categories. On paper, growth sounds like momentum. But in commercial reality, attempting to scale a brand while its core engagement numbers are trending downward creates a strategic mismatch that is difficult to manage. You're asking a new audience to come towards something that an existing audience is quietly stepping back from. The Victoria Beckham comparison keeps surfacing in these conversations for a reason. Her fashion venture required years of sustained financial backing, significant restructuring, and extended periods of operating losses before reaching a position of commercial stability. The question being raised about As Ever is not whether it can eventually reach that kind of stability, it's whether the structural support required to get there is actually in place. That's a question that hasn't been answered publicly, and in the absence of clarity, speculation fills the gap. The feedback loop that defines celebrity-driven brands also adds a layer of vulnerability that conventional retail businesses don't face in the same way.
Call it what it is, a celebrity image management platform disguised as reporting. People magazine has devolved into a captive mouthpiece for Meghan Markle's image rehabilitation machine, The archive speaks for itself. The same stories recycled in slightly different packaging. The formula never changes. Meghan Markle, the devoted mother. Meghan, the loving wife. Meghan, the visionary entrepreneur. Meghan, the misunderstood figure. Meghan, the resilient success story. Different headline, identical narrative.
Public perception shapes consumer interest. Consumer interest shapes traffic and sales. Sales figures shape the public narrative around success or struggle. And that narrative feeds directly back into public perception. Once that loop starts cycling in a negative direction, each individual data point becomes part of a larger story, and that story starts to carry its own momentum. Breaking out of that cycle requires either a significant shift in public sentiment, a major commercial success that resets the conversation, or both. Neither is guaranteed, and neither appears imminent based on the current data. And beyond the brand itself, the broader media ecosystem question isn't going away either. The syndication cycle that surrounds celebrity coverage means that content produced by one major outlet gets rephrased, repackaged, and redistributed across multiple platforms, amplifying a single narrative without necessarily adding new information or perspective. In that structure, visibility becomes self-sustaining, even when the underlying engagement data tells a different story. The machine keeps running, the numbers keep shifting, and the gap between what's being published and what audiences are actually responding to keeps widening.
People magazine has published an astonishing volume of Meghan Markle articles just in 2026 alone. Not major interviews, not award wins, not blockbuster projects, not cultural moments that actually dominated headlines. Instead, readers get a relentless cycle of product launches, Instagram recaps, outfit breakdowns, sweet family nods, vacation glimpses, and glowing lifestyle features, month after month.
So what does all of this actually add up to? 3 indicators, 3 separate data sets, all pointing in the same general direction over the same general time frame. A polling shift that shows favorable opinion declining and unfavorable opinion rising simultaneously. A traffic pattern that shows the only commercially relevant audience segment shrinking month after month. And a media environment that continues to push a consistent, high-volume, positive narrative, even as those underlying signals move against it. None of these streams prove causation on their own. The polling decline didn't directly cause the traffic drop. The media coverage didn't directly cause the polling shift. These are parallel movements, not a straight line of cause and effect, but in analytical terms, parallel movement across multiple independent indicators over the same period is itself meaningful. It suggests that something broader is happening in the space where public attention, commercial engagement, and media narrative all intersect, and that whatever is happening, it is showing up consistently enough across enough different measurements to be taken seriously. What remains genuinely uncertain is what comes next. Whether the current trajectory represents a temporary correction in public interest, the kind of fluctuation that every high-profile public figure experiences at various points, or whether it signals the beginning of a longer-term structural shift in how audiences relate to Meghan Markle's public identity and commercial ventures, that answer is still forming. The data available right now captures a specific window of time. The next set of figures will either confirm the trend or complicate it. And until that data arrives, the conversation will continue building on what's already visible. For now, the alignment across all 3 indicators is what's driving renewed attention to this story, and that attention is not going anywhere anytime soon. If this breakdown gave you something to think about, make sure you hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find this content. Subscribe if you haven't already, because new videos go up every single day, covering the biggest stories with the kind of detail that actually matters. Share this one with someone who needs to see it, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read them, and your perspective adds to the conversation. We'll see you in the next one.